Is the so-called release date diff real? You'll often hear League players talk about how newer champions just blow older ones out of the water in terms of sophistication and, indeed, strength. So much so that a term, release date diff, is now common parlance within the community. And while it is undeniable that League of Legends is just plagued with power creep, it is also true that some of the most unstoppable champions in the game, from pubs all the way to the pro scene, date back the furthest. So is new always better, or are the oldies still the goodies? Let's find out. Okay, so I was inspired to do this video after seeing a Reddit thread where someone asked the simple but all too understandable question, how the f do you kill Mundo? Now I know what you're thinking, sort of a low-level question. And it probably is. I assume the OP is still learning the game and was just genuinely asking in order to get better. That's not what's interesting about this. What is interesting is that there are, at the time of writing, over 200 comments debating the correct answer, which is fascinating. Now look, are tanks obscenely busted and just single-handedly ruining League of Legends? It's a subject for a different video, so I won't really get into it, but yes. Leaving that aside, Mundo is a very old, very simple champion that certain comps can really struggle into. And he's not the only one. In fact, he's pretty low on the list of super old, super annoying champions who, despite being very uninteractive, can just take over a server. So why am I saying all of this? Well, because there is this pervasive, long-standing idea that League of Legends, more than most esports titles, has just become brutally infected by power creep. And let's be honest, it has. For those who don't know, power creep is sort of an unofficial design principle whereby newer content, so characters, abilities, items, etc., just sort of inevitably become stronger or more useful than older content, hence why the power creeps. So when did it start getting bad in League? Well, you can debate it, but I don't really think there's a point, because I think there's a very clear subject zero, and it's Yasuo.
I remember when Yasuo came out, there was this really funny Reddit thread where it was like, Yasuo is like trying to play D&D with a 6-year-old who keeps making up abilities. And the idea is like, imagine you're one person and you're playing Brand and you're like, okay, and I throw a fireball at him. And the 6-year-old is like, well, I dodged the fireball with my dash. And then Brand's like, okay, well then I use my Pillar of Fire. It's like, I use my Pillar of Fire. Well, I dodge it with my dash. Okay, well I throw a fireball at you. I block it with my Wind Wall. Oh, okay, then I wait for my fireball to come back, and I throw it this time when your dash is down. It's like, no, my dash isn't down. I can use it whenever I want as long as there's another target. Okay, so, but clearly your wind wall is down, so this, I'm gonna throw a fireball and it's gonna work. Okay, that one hits me, but then I shield it. And it's like, oh, that's pretty funny.
Ever since that wind shitter came along, it just feels like Riot are in a perpetual arms race with themselves. There's no denying that since the introduction of Yasuo, the sheer number of like shields and invulnerabilities and dashes and cooldown resets and abilities that have true damage have just skyrocketed. Now here's the thing, I agree with August that Yasuo was sort of ahead of his time, so it wasn't quite immediate after he came out. But I would say over the past like 6 or 7 years, it's just gotten really bad. And what's worse is it's snowballed. Look, Sylas having like 2.5 dashes seemed innocent enough until we had a second, better, easier wind shitter named Yone, and Viego was just resetting our grandmothers, and then we had this skill tank combining the mobility of Akali with the tankiness of Ornn. Meanwhile, you've got Blitzcrank, who in the immortal words of Tyler 1, can press W to slow himself. Power creep is real. 100% it is. No one, not even the biggest Riot shill in the world, would deny that. The question is, does it really matter? Like, is the new shit really that much more broken than the old shit? There's a reason that pro players end up on Sej duty. Look, we all know that these flashy, dashy Timmy champs can just take over servers. Not only because in a lot of cases they're just fundamentally overkitted, but also because they're just game altering. The reason we know that is not just because their effect is felt by the everyday player, but because it is seen at the professional level. The poster children of this so-called release date diff, Rel, Yone, Cassante, New Skarner, Ambessa, just to name a few, don't just intermittently dominate at the highest level, but pretty consistently. No amount of nerfs seem able to meaningfully squash their presence. But it can't just be that new is always better, because demonstrably, it's not. 3 of the top 5 most picked champions in pro play in Season 15 are from 2012, 10, and 9, respectively. Expand that to the top 15, 12 were released in between 2009 and 2014. Flip that to the bottom 15, and you've got Kiana, Samira, and Briar sharing 2 picks between them. So it can't be that the release date diff is a universal constant. In a lot of cases, old, basic, simplistic champs whose kits are just eternally potent have become staples of the esport. Statistically, the best example of this is Ezreal, since he's this panacea ADC who is just always viable, which is fascinating because he's this like 2010 era champion who, despite undergoing some meaningful changes to his W, hasn't really undergone transformative changes as a champion. Now, is Ezreal broken because his pick rate is just insane at the pro level? I mean, it depends how you define it. I don't think so. In fact, I tend to agree with like the consensus opinion that Ez is just iconically one of the most honest champions in League alongside the likes of Lee Sin or Thresh. But there are some ancient champions who are just fucking menaces. To this day, I cannot comprehend how Nocturne's ult has gone 13 years without a meaningful rework. It is beyond busted considering how brain dead and easy it is to use. And it would be one thing if this was like a low-level pub stomp champion, but he is abused in silver and professional alike. Same with Pantheon's Q. It is a literal level 1 pike ult that under the right circumstances can net him a quadra kill. But the biggest offender has to be Jax. Jax was one of the very first League of Legends champions, literally dating back to the alpha, and to this day dominates all levels of play. And what's crazy is that the touch-ups and reworks he's seen over the years have actually been pretty light. Unlike an Evelynn or a Mordekaiser who've undergone substantial reworks, Jax is basically the same champion that he was 16 years ago, which is kind of crazy because by August's own admission, he continues to be a benchmark for strength.
A lot of times, like when you're looking at a new champ, you're kind of like, okay, well, how do I compete with Jax? Right? Like straight up, right? Like if you're making a top laner, that top laner is going to have to interact with Jax. Like, dude, I was making champions trying to compete back with Jax back in 2012, and I think that's still true today. And that's not saying Jax is a bad designer, he's crazy. I'm just noting that like many of our old champions hold up really, really well in Modern League.
There is a reason that champions like Gragas and J4 and Sejuani and Maokai are just institutions within pro play. They have reliable kits that are very easy to execute, and they're great blind picks, which is becoming a little bit less important since the introduction of Fearless, but still matters. Hell, even Garen went through like a crazy glow up in pro play a couple of months back, and he has like 3/4 of an ability and is designed for TFT players who don't have opposable thumbs.
I just think Garen is overpowered right now. Like, I mean, he gets like, the Last Stand now works on his ultimate, Axiom Arcanus works on his ultimate, like this does like half your health. Unironically, if you're up 45% health, you're dead.
Right.
Which, like, to me is just like, whoa, that's kind of crazy.
Now, to be clear, I'm not actually chastising people for playing simplistic champions or claiming that they can't be insane at them.
I feel like you have to be really good at the game to beat a Yon 1v1. Like, the way Baus plays Sion, I feel like if he played it any worse, because of the champion difference, he would never win 1v1. But he plays it like pixel perfect every time and dodges everything and hits everything. And the spacing and the movement and everything, like he just plays it so good. You have to play it so good to win that 1v1, I think.
I'm also not saying that Riot suddenly forgot how to make great champions. Jhin, who came out in 2016, is the closest thing Riot has to a perfect champion, in my opinion. Kai'Sa, who came out in 2018, is already this classic self-expressive design that is a pleasure to both watch and play. So it does seem as if the release date diff is sort of a myth, or at the very least, an overgeneralization. Is Cassante wildly overkitted? Oh my god, yes. To the point that it's like comedy that he even made it to the live server to begin with. He just egregiously outclasses every champion in the game. But to me, that seems to be just as much, if not more of a symptom of his role than his release date. If you look at these champions like Cassante, Ambessa, New Skarner, even Viego or Yone, they're all basically tanks and or bruiser assassins who just have a wild amount of mobility and shielding and CC and invulnerability, and they just break the game. If you look at Aphelios or Milio or Briar or Belveth or even Mel, not as much of an issue. Now, obviously so much of this is meta dependent and there's exceptions and it's difficult to quantify, but I think that on the whole, the release date diff just isn't as universal as the community makes it out to be. I think Riot have a horrible tank issue that they still aren't taking seriously enough, but that's a subject for a different day. If you look at the cold, hard numbers, it isn't the over-kitted, flashy, dashy champs who've single-handedly dominated World's pick rates. It's the old, reliable, easy-to-execute classics. Which is not to say that the over-kitted nightmares aren't insufferable. Of course they are. But so is Renekton. And that dude came out like 14 years ago. He has 200 years written all over him. Like it or not, champions like Yone or Silas or Viego are to a large degree what League of Legends is now. These high agency, high impact champions who have everything and just create these APM intensive skirmishes that are exciting to watch. And yes, in general, champions over-kittedness correlates with their release date. But just because they're flashier doesn't mean they're stronger. You ever tried playing Yone into Malphite? It's miserable. So yeah, I'm not saying don't hate on League of Legends champions. I'm saying don't be ageist about it. League has always been this dumb. It's part of why we love it. And we hate it.
Thanks for watching. If you want more content like this, hit the sub button and ring the notification bell. For unique bite-sized videos you won't find anywhere else, hit us up on our X, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.